Welcome to the Data at Your Desk series workshop, an introduction to Qualtrics. So this workshop is designed to introduce you to best practices for developing surveys in Qualtrics. So that'll be a little bit of best practices for survey development, and then mostly focusing on best practices for using the Qualtrics platform, which is an online survey software that is available to all Florida State University faculty, students, staff. Okay. It enables us to create and distribute complex questionnaires, although we typically do very simple things with it. It's got a lot of really cool features that I'm going to introduce you to today. And, we can use it for forms, we can use it for questionnaires, all from one platform. And so it's a really great, really valuable tool, especially for conducting research and collecting data. And so most of my uses and purposes for it are related to data, and I'm going to focus on those uses. But you'll see that it's can do some really cool things. So you might want to use it for other stuff in the future. This workshop is designed to be an introduction, and for that reason, I'm going to try to balance between things that you need to know and then also the best practices, but also give you a few hints and tips for things that you can look into and investigate later. For example, if you want to um, be a more advanced user of Qualtrics. But that'll be beyond the scope of today's workshop, but definitely if you want to follow up with me later to get at some of those more advanced features, or because Qualtrics is such a popular online survey platform, you will see that lots of folks use it. They've got really great help files and tutorials and things if you want to take your use to the next level. But for today, we will be just simply introducing it and how to use it. And how do I plan to do that? So I'm going to give you an overview. Well, I just gave you a lot of the overview, but I'm going to talk about the goals in just a second. We're going to do a sample survey that'll really help us explore the features of Qualtrics. I'm going to introduce Qualtrics itself, tell you more about it, and why I like to use it and some of its features. And then I'm going to give you some best practices for developing questionnaires. I'm going to ask you to draft a few questions that we can use to practice with and test out today in Qualtrics. And then I'm going to share some more tips and tricks and contingencies for how to use the software. I'll take you behind the scenes of the survey that I've built, but also I would encourage you to build alongside me. That way, if you have questions, you can ask those questions before we end today. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about scales. So not just questions, but also scales. And then matrix questions, which are related to those scales. And then putting it all together, how to finish off a survey and evaluate it for look and feel and flow so that it's ready to go, and see what options you have to distribute it. And then if we have just a little bit of extra time, then I'm going to kind of preview data analysis options. Qualtrics can do a little bit of the data analysis, like basic data analysis, which might be sufficient for your use. So, if we have time, we'll look at that. But if that won't be enough for you, at least figuring out how to export data into a format that is useful to you, like if you want to pull it into another software like SPSS or Excel. So, lots to cover today. Might as well go ahead and dive in. I already told you some of the goals of this introductory workshop, but by the time we finish today, you'll know the pros and cons of using Qualtrics as your survey software tool. Be able to construct a basic questionnaire, understanding how to build questions into Qualtrics, and I will leave you with knowing how to get additional help beyond today, beyond the end of this workshop. If there's anything else you want to get out of this session today, feel free to go ahead and let me know in the chat right now. And I hope that you will be inspired by all the possibilities of this great tool to which we have access. So if you do have other goals or other needs, feel free to let me know. If not, I will keep pushing forward. Okay. So what I'm showing you now, this code on the screen is for a sample survey that I would like you to take that goes through many of the question forms on Qualtrics. So you can uh, scan it if you got a like a mobile device, great. I'm also going to put a link in the chat that you can use if you want to take the survey from a computer. Link is coming in just a moment. There it is. All right, so either scan the code you see on the screen or click on the link that you see in the chat. Take the sample survey. I'll give you a few moments, maybe a few minutes to do that. And then when you're done, just come back and give me a thumbs up to let me know that you have completed the survey. You're just catching up with us. We are taking the sample survey by scanning the QR code or clicking on the link in the chat. And when you finish, you come back and give me a thumbs up and we'll talk about our experience. It's good that the thumbs are starting to roll in. If you haven't finished yet, go ahead and take another minute.
Do we have star rating in the example survey? We
Yes.
did have rank order.
Take about 1 more minute to finish up the survey if you haven't already. And if you are done, give me a thumbs up to let me know you're done. And we can talk about the survey. They're coming. The thumbs are coming. If you haven't finished, that's okay. We'll take about 30 more seconds. And if you haven't finished after 30 seconds, that's okay too. But then we'll start our discussion. I want to hear from you about your experience with the survey. I want to hear what questions, that you liked or didn't like, anything in particular that stood out to you or that you noticed, or even if you, oops, I'll go back, even if you had like a favorite question type. So let's see. I think we are mostly done. Does anybody want to share their experience, what stood out, what they liked, what they didn't like, what worked, what didn't work? You can unmute and share, or you can share your reflection in the chat. Okay, I see a comment already that it was a bit challenging to give a number ranking on the phone, but probably much easier on a desktop. Yes, probably so. I I don't doubt that. Let's see, does anybody else have thoughts or feedback to share? I will not take it personally. It is this is for demonstration purposes only. So, there are some things that I know don't work well in that sample survey. And then kind of like this, the issue with the rating or the ranking, we always have to remember that people will take our surveys on different devices. And typically we're designing it from a computer. And, we just think about how it looks and how it feels on a computer. But we have to remember that people use different devices, most often probably a cell phone, and then different versions of cell phones, and then different like operating systems on cell phones result in people seeing different things. And so something that we think is fun and easy and this is going to give me really great data might actually end up being very challenging, so challenging that people will skip your question. And so this kind of reminds me that of something that another researcher here said about another software, not Qualtrics, but I feel like this applies. It's how we typically use Qualtrics, and there it has been used a lot. You've probably seen it. You probably used it for stuff like filling out forms because people all over campus use it. So like filling out forms and then basic surveys is like using it in such a simple way because it has so many features that is like driving a Lamborghini to the grocery store to get a loaf of bread. It's probably a lot more than you need, but it's going to do the job. And so I'm going to be sharing some of those features today and some of those advanced features. And just like you saw with this sample survey, Qualtrics can do a lot of things and have a lot of different type of questions. But just because it can do it doesn't mean we should do it. Okay, so we also have to think about collecting the best data and who our users are. And, if you're designing a survey for college students, many of them are young, many of them have cell phones and have had that technology their entire lives and very adept and use that well. But if you're designing a survey that's going to be, um, maybe to release or distribute at a senior citizen center, then it's going to be a totally different experience. They might prefer to use tablets or desktop computers or laptop computers over cell phones to um, answer questions and share data. So we always have to kind of think about our intended audience when deciding on the features of Qualtrics that we want to use or not use. And like I was just saying, it does have a lot of features, but what is it? It's a web-based survey and data collection tool to create and conduct online surveys. Um, like I said, everything from simple forms to very complex academic research. And the best part of all, we already have it. It's already available to all of us here for free, no charge, because we have FSU credentials. And so it can be accessed at fsu.qualtrics.com. I will share the link in the chat once we actually are ready to jump on to the platform itself, but you just did like a mini tour of the different question types in Qualtrics, which is Awesome. But I want to just also tease you about some of the other things that Qualtrics can do. Before that, I would also say that, it's used for different kinds of data entry. I already talked about like filling out forms, like registration forms. We could also use it to share information. We could also use it to like build and create other types of instruments. Like, if I was teaching a class, I could use it to create a quiz. I could use it to create an assignment where I'm sharing a file or data set with others because I can upload that into Qualtrics. Voting, polls, all kinds of things. And then being able to easily export to the uh, the data type or software of my choice, like SPSS or Excel, or exporting my data in a CSV file. It makes it really easy to pair with the other steps of my research. And so I gave you that example about the driving the Lamborghini to get a loaf of bread, but I've actually seen where people consider Qualtrics. They actually say the Mercedes of survey software. It is pretty awesome and has a lot of features and, great, a lot of different ways that we can analyze things. It's considered safe in terms of data security, where if we're using Qualtrics, IRB doesn't take issue to that because it allows for anonymous replies. So that's a really great feature because it's so widely used and been around for so long, since 2015. It's pretty stable. No bugs have been experienced. So that. And then my favorite thing is it's pretty easy to use. Like I feel like intuitive, where once you know how to build questions, it's very simple for you to keep going and keep building questions. But there's a lot more to know than just building questions. And then, like I already mentioned, because it's been around so long and so widely used, it's got a lot of great tutorials, online groups, online documentation, its own like system for support. I think you could probably chat with people to get support if you needed it. And then, because we're not often doing research on our own, we're doing research on teams. It allows us to collaborate on surveys and share surveys, giving full editing rights to others, or maybe not, maybe just some viewing rights. And we can export our surveys into Word documents or PDFs, just like we can export our data. And then, lots of great features. But I told you that I was going to tell you the pros and the cons. Okay. The pros and the cons. So it is great. It is great, but maybe not great for everything. So if you're doing like a timed experiment where you need to measure people's reaction time, and like reaction time is a crucial component of that experiment, Qualtrics is not going to be the tool for you. It can time each question, but it's not reliable enough to use as a dependent variable. So that's something to keep in mind. It also cannot record um, respondents or participants' voice. It cannot record handwriting, although it does have a signature feature where you can ask somebody to sign, like with the digital pen or maybe a finger, but it can't really record handwriting. Um, so if you're thinking about like accent marks or particular scripts that don't use an English alphabet, something to keep in mind. Um, I know there's some capabilities for speech, but those are also limited. And if you were going to use the Qualtrics for like to create a quiz for a class, um, that could cause a few issues if the class is in a classroom all at the same place at one time, all taking the same quiz slash survey. That could be an issue with the network, cause like some lag and some delay time. So not that's not a use that I would recommend. Also, graded quizzes is more of an advanced feature, like the scoring and stuff. So I would also say you probably want to use there are other quizzing and scoring platforms that would be better to use than Qualtrics. So it's not gonna be ideal for that. Excuse me. And then I already mentioned how secure the data are. once you use it. But another good thing to know about our use of Qualtrics is that we've already got FSU branding built in. And we can, when I say we can play with the look, feel, and flow, we can actually change, the colors and the themes and stuff. But if we're doing something for class or for campus, it's great that it's already built in where, we've already got the colors that we need, the logos, the appropriate, the approved stuff that we can use. It's already loaded up and built in, so we don't have to, um, worry about that so much. And that also gives a lot of legitimacy to the surveys and stuff we create, because let's say if it were sent to maybe alumni who aren't on campus, with us right now, but wherever they may be, if they receive the survey and they can see the FSU branding at the top of it and they see the FSU colors throughout, that just adds more legitimacy to what it is that you are doing. And I talked about people who could be anywhere. There are some various language options. I've never translated a survey into a different language. Although I know Qualtrics can do that. That is a feature, and I don't know if it's a free feature because I see something about translation, a paid translation, but they might also offer a free version. I haven't done that yet, and that we can also share the surveys from Qualtrics in many forms. Like I just shared it with you through a link, and I just shared it with you through a QR code, but there are other ways as well. And then you can also, I put one link in the chat that anyone could click on, but you can also use you can also use Qualtrics in a way where everyone gets their own unique link, and that is valuable if you want to follow up with people. You can actually have Qualtrics send out emails and kind of keep track of how people are responding. And so, if I'm sending out a survey to 100 people and I know who the 100 people are, and I see that my survey has been open for a week and 77 people have not responded, I can send an email reminder to those 77 only instead of all 100 people again. Like if I'm only using one link and let's say I post it on social media, and I have to keep posting without knowing who's taken it already. But this way I can be very targeted and say, oh, I know you didn't take my survey yet, and so I am going to send it directly to you and ask you again to take the survey. If I do this through Qualtrics, I'm even going to include your name. I'm going to say, hey, you, yes, you. I sent you a survey a week ago, but you haven't taken it yet. Can you please take my survey? Please take my survey. Thank you. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers, the pros and cons. I did mention a little teaser. I'm going to go through and give like a behind the scenes tour of the survey that you took, along with sharing the best practices for development. But I also wanted you to see a few things that Qualtrics can do, features that I will not cover today, but really, really cool features that somehow I've got to figure out how to cover in the future. More of the advanced things that we typically don't do, but pretty cool. One of the reasons that I love Qualtrics is because you can use a rich content editor to edit your content richly using different text formats, different colors, different formatting like bold and italics and different heading sizes and stuff like that. But you can also add in files and graphics and different images like what you see here. And incorporate them into the questions, not just an overview, like not just a text blurb, but actual survey questions. So imagine something like this. You can upload an image, and you can tell Qualtrics that different regions of this image are different responses. And so the question might be, in what area do you primarily live and work? And because I have uploaded it into Qualtrics and set it as a particular type of question called a hotspot question, I'm asking people to look at the map and click on where they live. And that is going to give me the response. It's going to give me the data I need, about the region that they live in without having to list it by word or having, because think about it. If you see region two that has, let's say, 20 counties, that means I'm going to have to list all 20 of them to ask people, hey, where do you live? Rather than just clicking on the map. So that's a really cool feature. The heat map. kind of gives similar, but not quite, where if you're asking people to um, review something, it can give an XY coordinate to where the mouse is hovering over on the screen. And you get that results kind of like in a heat map to show, you know, it's not really the eye tracking, but the mouse movement over a graphic. So that's really cool. And then this other one, the highlight question type, which I find really cool, but I haven't created a use for it yet. Um, in this example, where's my mouse? In this example, below are some comments after a news article. Please highlight the text to identify text that exemplifies rudeness or politeness. And so you can actually upload your text into Qualtrics, and it's going to break it down word by word. And it's not for you as the person creating the question, word by word. You can tell it, you know, which words can be highlighted, which words cannot. But then the person who's taking your survey, when they highlight the text, they get a little option, and you can change what there's like a green, a yellow, and a red, and you can change the word that's in each. Like instead of polite and rude, maybe I want yes and no, or affirmative, negative, or whatever. Yes, maybe, no. If I use all three colors, they can highlight the text and make their selection. And then I'm getting the data back on which words they highlighted as whatever. And so, you know, that can help with like a sentiment analysis. So lots and lots and lots of different question types beyond the ones that you saw in the sample survey that you just did. But these are some of, I would say, the more advanced uses. I was hoping to just show you a little teaser to whet your appetite and make you want to explore these features and use them more. But for the most part, or really for the only part today, we are focusing on questionnaires. Questionnaires, people often use the word survey. However, survey is a word that can mean a few different things. And now that I'm saying this, I'm realizing that I didn't even introduce myself. And why I'm such a stickler for the word questionnaire. And the reason for that is my name is Miley Turner. I am a social science research and data librarian. But prior to being a librarian, I was an instructor. I was a professor teaching research methods and teaching research methods courses and teaching students how to build surveys and distribute surveys and analyze the results of those surveys, which is why I like to be very clear with my wording that this questionnaire that we're building, the questionnaire is a type of survey, but also an interview is a type of survey. They're both considered survey research methods. And so we use the word survey, we typically mean questionnaire. All right, I'm talking particularly about questionnaires. And questionnaire, you can tell from the name of it, questionnaire, mostly questions, but it doesn't always have to be questions. It could be other types of items like statements or like you just saw with the pictorial questions to solicit information that can be analyzed. Okay. And so I I'll try to use the word questionnaire and be really clear. But then the people who take our questionnaires, we call them respondents. Okay. The ones who are providing the data, we call them respondents. And why why questionnaires? You probably, if you're here at this workshop now, you probably already have an intended use for a questionnaire, but one of the really useful things, most useful things, is that it's a great way to collect primary data from a large sample. And I mean like a large sample where it's just not feasible to conduct individual in-depth interviews with all of these people or even focus groups with groups subgroups of the people. Instead, you know, I can design a questionnaire that can go to thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, allowing me to collect even more data for, you know, the investment of time and energy that I put into developing it. And also money, can't forget money. Money is a big factor because we don't always have a budget to do our research. And so, because we already have access to this platform, through the university, it means that I don't have to go buy another one, and I don't have to, buy tools and equipment to do other types of data collection, like if I'm trying to collect video or audio or things like that. So money, time, energy are very important to designing research, and so being sure that your questionnaire has a clear purpose and it's providing the type of data that you need and want to make decisions. Um, it's always great if you can start from the beginning, with the purpose of your research and being very clear and direct on what it is that you're doing, how you're going to be doing it, the purpose of the questionnaire, the value of participating, working all that out in advance, knowing if you're going to offer confidentiality, if you're collecting personally identifying information, or if you're not going to collect any personally identifying information at all and give an anonymous questionnaire, those decisions that you want to make up front. And then, as we start to develop questions, just being sure you return to the question about whether or not or one, what is the purpose of this questionnaire? And are your questions providing the data that you need to answer questions or make the decision? Okay, so I like to say begin with the end in mind. If you've ever read Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, that's, I think, the first one, begin with the end in mind. So as we are getting ready to practice developing great questions to go into Qualtrics, I want you to think about a few things. If you're already working on a research project, wonderful. Think about your topic or whatever it is that you are interested in, or if you already have the variables identified, bring those to mind. And if you don't know exactly what you want to research yet, think about some things that you're interested in because this is not a class and this is not graded. I don't care if it's about horseback riding or basket weaving or whatever it is you're interested in or passionate about. Just bring some topic to mind. And then the next thing that I want you to do is to draft 5 questions that could appear on a questionnaire survey about your research topic. So I want you to think about them. You can, jot them down if you've got paper in front of you, or you can type them up if you want to open a document. And then I'm going to go through some tips for you to refine those questions. And then after you refine them, we are ready to go and practice putting them into Qualtrics. So I'll give you about 2 minutes. I'll say 3 to 5 questions. Doesn't have to be all 5. And again, this is just a quick brainstorming activity, just so you have something to work with here. So jot down a few questions, get them in mind, and then we'll go through some guidelines to make them better. And then we'll be ready to put them in Qualtrics. So I'll stop talking so you can think and get your 3 to 5 questions ready on whatever topic. I'm not going to ask you to share your topic or your questions, but unless you want to. Take about 4 to 5 more seconds to draft just a few questions. It doesn't have to be all 5, but let's say, at least 3 questions about your research or a topic of interest. And if you already have questions, go ahead and pull those questions up or pull those questions out so we can think about how to make them even better. 30 more seconds. All right. Does anybody want to share what their topic of interest is? You don't have to share the questions, but just to give us an idea of what you're interested in, or what you want to, what kind of topic you would maybe design a survey around. You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute and share. While you are typing or thinking, uh, I gave you just the briefest introduction about me and my research experience, but I didn't even really tell you my research area. So my primary research area is environmental justice. I'm a sociologist and an environmental sociologist, so I explore relationships between people and environments, and how people influence their environments, and how environments influence people. And so a big area of my work has been about environmental justice. More recently, I've kind of been working with a colleague on like more leisure study things. And so um, she is in leisure studies, and me environmental sociology. And so the overlap for us was kind of exploring. We just published a paper a couple years ago on um, Black women's beach experiences or motivations for visiting beaches. And so that was like the perfect intersection of her work on leisure studies and my work on environmental sociology. And so that's the kind of things that I work on, but I have a ton of interest in, could be many, 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 many things. And so I see from you all book marginalia, annotation behaviors people engage in when they read. All right, and being able to use, or already using Qualtrics as a registration form for an annual event, but also volunteer registration and attendee feedback. Yeah, it's a great tool for that because there's so much that you can, so many options for ways that you can build questions. So that's great that you already have some experience or interest in Qualtrics too. And thinking about the questions that you've drafted, I'm going to quickly go through some guidelines for asking questions and asking better questions, and then we'll hop on over to Qualtrics to see the behind the scenes of how the survey is built. Okay, so I've listed them all here, but I'm going to um, kind of review them more in depth, or maybe I should just, actually, I think I could probably just work from this. So when we get into Qualtrics, or you see from the sample survey, you've got a lot of options for how you ask questions. And again, they're not always good options. So being sure that you select the appropriate form of the question, or appropriate type of question for what it is that you want to know and the type of data you want to collect. The next one, I will say making items very clear. Shorter is better. So take a look at the questions that you've written. You just want to be sure. Uh, I can tell you from all my years of teaching that people do not read, do not like to read, and do not read for detail. And so it's best to be very short and very clear if you're going to get accurate and valid data. So, make sure your items are very clear. If you have to seek IRB approval for your study and include your instrument, they want respondent facing or public facing things to be understandable at, let's say, about a sixth grade level. If you're doing research with adults, they want those things written like between a sixth and eighth grade level. I say sixth grade just to be safe. And so we're not using the same type of jargon that we use when we're talking to other researchers or using in class. We are making things very clear to a public audience without talking down to people, or, dumbing things down. We're just making it very, very clear. And this really relates to the next one about avoiding double barrel questions. If you look at your questions right now and you have the word and in any of your questions, I'm going to say pause and let's wait and let's revisit that. Because oftentimes when you have the word and, it's representing what we call a double barrel, where you're asking about two things at once. And I have some examples of this. Maybe I should just go through my examples. I'll get to those examples. Um, but yeah, and then you can keep reviewing your questions. But what I would say, whatever questions you develop before we get into reviewing them, they're probably closed-ended or open-ended, or they might have been like on a scale. Closed-ended questions being exactly what they sound like. You are giving the options for respondents to choose from, okay? And you're giving all the options where you want to be exhaustive. Like it should not be, uh, no one should skip your question because they don't see their response option in there. I think a great example of this, if I ask the question, and as a sociologist, this would be a question I might have on the survey. Um, what is your gender? Okay. And so if I say, what is your gender? And I give response options and I say, what is your gender? Woman, man. Well, that may not include all of the ways that people identify. And so it's not an exhaustive list. And so then I would revise that. I would say, what is your gender? Woman, man, transgender woman, transgender man, non binary, other. And I hate to other people, but for survey purposes, it is necessary to give an option because I can't possibly list all the ways that people might identify their gender. I've left a blank before, and I've had somebody write in the blank that they identify as a houseplant. Well, how was I supposed to know that to put that on the list? I mean, I can just cover, as many categories as I can think of, and then I have to give space for people to identify in other ways. And so if you have me adding other to this list makes it exhaustive because it's saying you're going to be in one of these, and if you're not, write in and tell me what it is or what you how you identify. And then the other part of those closed-ended questions, they should be mutually exclusive. And so I should not be checking the box for more than one. Unless it's something like I say, select all that apply, like if another question might be on a social survey, could be, what is your race? Let's say, what is your race? I'll leave ethnicity out for now. I'll say, what is your race? Well, I could let people select more than one, and that's fine. I just need to be sure my question is structured that way. Um, and I could also say, only choose one, and then, kind of force that they select one. So you just want to be sure that you're giving people enough options where they don't skip the question because they don't see themselves reflected, or they don't answer in an inaccurate way because they just had to choose the thing that they felt was maybe closest, even if it wasn't accurate. And then open-ended questions, open-ended, you let the respondents write in her or his own answers or their own answers. Okay, now getting back to those guidelines, I already talked about making items clear. I was talking about avoiding double barrels, but I wanted you to see this example here. Is this workshop interesting and useful? If you get to the post-workshop survey and you saw this question on there, you might be thinking like, oh, this is a very useful workshop, but it wasn't very interesting. Well, how are you going to answer the question? Are you going to say yes? Or are you going to say no? Well, you don't know which part you're answering. And so that's why I was saying if you have the word and in any of your questions, you want to pause and think about that and see if you can just break that down into two separate questions. Because instead, I would say, is this workshop interesting? Yes, no, I don't know. Is this workshop useful? Yes, no, I don't know. Okay, so it's easy to fix the double barrel because you can just make two separate questions. That's the great thing about Qualtrics. You're not paying per question. You do have to have some consideration of screen real estate. You don't want this thing to go on forever. Often we don't really offer, well, many times we don't offer an incentive for people taking our surveys or filling out our forms. And so they're just doing this out of the kindness of their heart, generously giving us their time. And so if somebody's giving you their time, such a gift, you don't want to take an hour of it, especially if you don't need that for your purposes. And so we really, had to think about like, okay, purpose of your survey again and getting the data that you need. And you might realize that, hey, you don't need all these other questions. You just need, a set because you want to keep this survey under 10 minutes or under 7 minutes. You want to be sure that people will actually finish it because it doesn't feel like they're taking too much time out of their day, their life, or whatever. Okay, so keep your questions short, keep your questions clear. avoiding the double barrel, and then just being sure that folks who are responding have enough information to respond. I gave the example earlier about distributing a survey at the senior center. Well, if that survey is about an evaluation of um, FSU library workshops, and these are not FSU students or faculty, staff, or really any way associated. They might be alumni, but it could have been 50 years since they were on campus. And, on campus at a time before there were workshops or computers, well, personal computers on campus. So those questions really would not be appropriate, and they wouldn't have the right competencies to answer because they're not your intended target audience or population. So just be sure that all of the factors align. Not only do they need to be competent to answer, they've got to be willing to answer. And so we can think about how we ask questions about some sensitive topics. I have found or have learned that for a questionnaire, it is better to put the most interesting questions right up front in the beginning at the top, rather than starting with your demographic questions like what is your age, what is your race, what is your gender. Also, because depending on what you're researching, that can kind of have an effect where people believe that they're being, evaluated. The rest of your questions, they're being evaluated, by their gender or by their race, and so maybe that wouldn't be as natural as response as it normally would. And so for that reason, I say put the most interesting thing up front. If I get to your first question and I see that you are asking me about um, school pride, school spirit, something like that. I'm gonna say, okay, yeah, I like these questions. I'm gonna keep answering these questions, and I'm collecting very valuable data. And then by the time, well, I should say you are collecting very valuable data. And by the time I get to the end of your survey, let's just say I get to the questions about age, race, gender, other demographics, and I decide to quit the survey prematurely, then you've already collected data about your key variables, the stuff you really, really wanted to know, which I would say is definitely more pertinent than, the demographic stuff. Yeah, you might need that for analysis, but you've gotten additional responses to questions about your key variables. And I already talked about the purpose of the survey. Making sure everything's aligned. Of course, every question should be relevant because we want to keep these questionnaires tight, brief, unless you've got a big budget to compensate people for their time. You want to be sure everything is relevant. And I already talked about making sure that they are short. It's also generally a good idea to avoid negative items because people it's kind of difficult to process the negative statements like if you have the words not or un or anti in a question or statement. For example, um, the United States should not recognize Cuba. And you're asking people to agree or disagree with that statement. Well, something about the mental processing where people don't process those negative items within a question well. And so you want to think about like rephrasing that. Especially if you're asking about the amount of agreement or how they favor something. So just think about how people are identifying with attitudes. Um, Similarly, being able to avoid bias and biased terms and bias being anything that can encourage someone to respond a particular way. And I mean anything. So um, if you have a term or phrase, a name in your question, you want to be sure that it's not biasing the result. For example, do you agree or disagree with the recent Supreme Court decision that blah, blah, blah? Well, just because I dropped Supreme Court in there, that is going to bias some responses because people are going to look at that and say, well, the Supreme Court said it, then yeah, okay. Yeah, then it's probably legit. The same way if you're using, it could be the name of a federal agency. It could be something like NASA. Uh, having that in a question or statement can bias the results, even particular names. If I say, do you agree or disagree with President Trump's recent decision to blank? Some people are going to see that name Trump and automatically agree with anything. Some people are going to see that same name and automatically disagree with anything. And you don't want to bias your question in that way. You want to see if you're trying to get at people's true attitudes and feelings, take the name out and just ask about the item that you want to know about. All right, uh, I'm going to share maybe one more thing, and then I think the rest of this we can get once we get into Qualtrics. Thinking about question types, because once we get in here, there's going to be a whole lot of different options for how you ask these questions. You just saw that with the sample survey, but I want to give this example of why it's so important to give some thought into how you ask the question. So, a simple demographic variable that I would want, just thinking about age, maybe I want to collect people's um, birth years, or well, maybe this is how I'm going to calculate age. I need their month and year of birth. So, two ways that I could do this. First, I could just say, please type in your month and year of birth and give a text field for them to respond. So you see a single line text field. All right. And so if I were to do that, and it has been done before, and you have an example of some of the results. Well, if I asked you this question right now, even if I just asked about your month and day of birth, and I actually I should. Uh, can you tell us your birthday? It doesn't have to be the year. The month and the day of your birth. If you can put that in the chat, just the month and the day, not the year. Month and day. Like for me, it's May 2nd. Oh, wow. We got a lot of May babies in here, which is terrible for my example. But what I was curious about, okay, I see a November 18th. Okay. Um, it's going to be a little challenging because so many of us are in May. Well, what I was getting at is that people abbreviate months in different ways, and that is a challenge. The difficulty with us May babies is May is so short, we don't really have to abbreviate it at all. We can just say May. But, think about uh, November 18th, how people might also other ways to write November if they just write NOV or NOV period. You can see here where when people were asked to type in their month and year of birth, these are the various responses. May 1994, simple, straightforward. But then the next person that was born in May of 1986, they wrote with numbers instead of writing out the word. All right. And then they put a slash in there. Okay. And then this next person in January, they wrote out the abbreviation for January with a slash from 1979. And then this person wrote Toyotathon 1933. I don't know if that's like a autocorrect or autofill text, or they're trying to let us know they were born during Toyotathon in 1933. Well, I don't know when Toyotathon is or was, if they still do it. Like, oh, what month is that? I don't know. And so this is an example when you let people write in the responses, you might get all kinds of things abbreviated in different ways. Some people use commas, some people use periods, some people use slashes. But instead, if I had asked that question to just to make it closed ended and say, what year were you born? And then just get the year and put it like in a drop down menu, and not even letting people type in the year, just putting it all the years in a drop down and letting them select, and doing the same thing with month, writing out all the months in the drop down menu. Look how neat and orderly the information comes back compared to what's on the left. And so this is why I'm saying it's really important to ask your question in the proper way if you want to get good data. Otherwise, you're going to get something wild like the stuff like Toyotathon 1933, and you're going to be like, what? Somebody's going to have to go back and clean up this data and standardize it so they're all written in the same format for analysis. Well, why have that extra step when you can just format the questions in a way where you're getting the data in the right form from the start, and make it even easier on yourself as a researcher or your research assistants who are going to have to go back and clean up this data. All right. I feel like I've talked enough about questions and we should really kind of get into Qualtrics because this other stuff I can show you in Qualtrics. So I'm skipping ahead. We are ready to log in fsu.qualtrics.com, and I will also put that into the chat if copy that link. And then I'm going to navigate to my Qualtrics to give you the behind the scenes um, look. If you register for this workshop online, you are also asked to go ahead and make your Qualtrics account. You don't really have to make an account, you just need to sign in so you'll have the account. And then once you do that, I mean, it's just basically like activating it because we all have access to accounts, but it wouldn't be difficult if you hadn't already done that. If you just went to fsu.qualtrics.com, it's going to ask you to um, authenticate. Um, the duo the authentication. It's going to ask for that, but after that, you should pretty much be in. And so once we get in there, I'm going to give you the behind the scenes tour, show you how to add new questions, show you the different question types, a different additional survey options, including that rich content editor, and display logic, skip logic, pipe text, some of the cool things, cool, but kind of basic things that you can do. All the things I did with that sample survey. So let me stop sharing this. Stop sharing this and start sharing my Qualtrics screen. And if you're already in Qualtrics, feel free to start playing around and building questions. I don't know where my screen is, so let me stop sharing everything so I can find the right one. Oh, the reason I can't find it is because it locked me out. That's why I can't find it. So I'm logging back in and then, okay, thought I was logging back in. Let's try this again. All right, I'll log in. Once you log in, if you've never used it before, you'll have like a blank screen. But if you have used it before, all of your um, surveys will appear. Like I've got all the things I'm working on the left. And when I go to my sample survey, it takes me to the build screen of the sample survey. And that's where we want to be. That's where we want to work from. Um, all right. Uh, let's just get to it. So you see this thing dancing around the screen. I mentioned to you one of the reasons that I love Qualtrics is for that rich content editor. And so you see this sample survey I created just for this workshop. I mean, not just this workshop, but teaching about Qualtrics. And that's why I have so many responses already, because I also want to show you when we get to the analysis, I think I saw 257 responses. We actually have something that we could work with here. But it's just a sample survey. Most surveys begin with some sort of like text. That's informed consent, it's a description of the research, like what's happening. Here I'm just giving you very basic information about, it's voluntary and it's anonymous. Just simple, again, for demonstration purposes. But what you want to do, you see this blue line around this question lets me know that I've got this question highlighted, like not, you see it's not on this other question. But when you have a question selected, you've got the panel on the left that appears to tell you about that question. So this is a text slash graphic. I call it a question, but it's not a question. Text slash graphic. This is a question type, the type of content, and then some other options for behavior. I'll get to those later. But what I want to do is when I click inside of the question, I get additional options pop up. And the one I'm looking for here is the rich content editor. Nothing happened. Let's try that again. Come on. Rich content editor. I think that's my graphic. There we go. I was just not clicking the button hard enough with the trackpad. Okay. So in my rich content editor, exactly what it sounds like, a way to edit content richly. I get all these options for how I want to format my text. All right. This thing is kind of distracting. But I can even put, let's say you have a video to describe your research study. Maybe you want to give informed consent, the spiel about it in video form because it's kind of long, or maybe you want to give your description that way. I could have uploaded a video. I could upload an image. I can upload a GIF here. You can see if I wanted to upload a video, I could insert media here. This image, like a standard kind of thing that you might be used to with rich content editors to insert a graphic. That's how I got this guy in here. And then, of course, formatting the text itself, if I want to use headings or different fonts options, the size, bold, italic, underline, the stuff that you are used to. Or if I want to strip all of the formatting at all, you see I've got some red text here. I've got some bolding here. I don't think I have any italics, but let's say I wanted to remove all the formatting, I could easily do that. If I wanted to link to, let's say, the web page about my research study, I could add a link to my text. Bulleted lists, numbered lists, like all kinds of things. The standard things that you will be used to in a text editor, with the addition of cool things like being able to upload an entire file. So, for example, if you are teaching a workshop and you wanted to give people the data file that you want them to work through or analyze, you can upload that file into and then talk about it. Say, hey, download this file for the workshop, or download this file to answer these next few questions. So this is what I mean about feature rich. I can use videos, files, links, text, graphics, all of that. So you want to be able to use your rich content editor, but you don't want to do it in a way that is distracting. Like I'm scrolling down because this dancing radish is distracting me. But you don't want anything that's going to be too distracting to the people. Like you don't want to use, rainbow colored text. Just because you can use every color text doesn't mean you want to necessarily do that. Just because you can make things different sizes. Like again, remember the user experience. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. So be sure to use those rich content options judiciously. Just be sure you don't do anything that is detracting from your survey experience. All right, so on to the next one, which is the most basic type of question you can have in Qualtrics. And once you're in Qualtrics and building a new survey, when you see this plus sign here, which you got a question highlighted with the blue ring around it, if you want to add a question above it, hit that plus sign. If you want to add a question below it, hit the plus sign at the bottom. And if you want to delete the question, that is that red circle with a line in it right there in the middle, okay? So very simple question. So when I highlight it, you can look over in the panel. This is where you're going to get most of your options. You can get things on screen too, but I like to kind of see them in the panel because this is where I can choose what type of question it is. And we are used to using the term multiple choice, like a multiple choice quiz. When you think about as something with a question with multiple answers you can choose from, not quite the same in Qualtrics. Multiple choice means multiple answers, but they can only make a single choice the way it is now. And typically that's indicated by the circles, the radial dials, okay? So I could tell it that I only want one answer. All right, you can only be one kind of person. You can only be a cat person or you can only be a dog person. Later, I went back and added both. I guess you could be both. But you have to choose. You can only be a cat person, a dog person, or both. You can't be all three. You can be none of them, but you can't be all of them. So I only want them to choose one answer. But if I was going to let them choose multiple answers, you see those circles turn into boxes like check boxes where they could just select all that apply. If I wanted to add more, maybe you're a snake person. All easy. I can just hit, add another response and I can type in snake person. And then of course I'd have to change this from both to all, but since I don't know any snake people, I'm just going to go ahead and remove that choice. Um, and then again, I can choose how it appears. If I'm having the responses appear in the list, but instead maybe I want them to appear, horizontally, I can easily make that change here. But again, most people are used to seeing questions like this in a vertical list. If you only have a few responses, great. If I had maybe 12 responses, maybe I would instead tell it to put them in columns. All right, and I've got it appearing as a list, but if I wanted a drop down menu, again, I could do that. But remember, think about the different ways that people are going to be taking your survey. So if it's most people are going to be taking it from the phone, is it going to be easy enough for them to navigate a drop down list? Or if I'm asking them, the select box, my least favorite, because I don't know if you've ever used something or maybe done it from like a computer where you select something and try to scroll down with your mouse, even if you have like that dial on your mouse, where you try to scroll down, but it instead changes your selection. I hate when that happens. So I have a bias against the select box. But the list, people are used to seeing information in a vertical list like this. And so for if you have few, I would say few responses, I mean few response options, this is a choice. And then I can tell it if I want a question to be required or not. You know how often you take fill out forms or stuff and you see that little red asterisk indicating that it's a required question. Well, if people cannot end or exit my survey unless they answer this question, that means I'm forcing a response. If I would just like them to answer the question, maybe they try to end the survey, or maybe they forgot and skipped over it and try to end the survey, it's going to go back and tell them, please answer this question. But for now, for me, it's a required question. And I'll get to these other ones later. Well, I'll get to those other ones now. Oh, one thing that I should mention that you see here, I've got page breaks. So after this first part that introduces the purpose of the survey and, gives my informed consent. And, I'll probably say something like, if you consent to take part in this survey, click on next or whatever, or maybe I'll add a question on that first page. Do you consent? Yes or no? Or something that says, check the one, I do consent and understand my participation is voluntary, or I do not consent. And then I could tell them to go, I could tell them, not tell them, tell Qualtrics, if they say do not consent, go ahead and end the survey right there. All right. I will also say that, oh, I was getting to the page breaks. I put a page break there because if somebody does not consent, there's no point in them looking at all of the questions. And I don't want them to start answering questions if they say they don't consent. So it's usually a good idea to have a page break after that very first page of introductory information. And then there are other reasons that you would want to use page breaks, but you don't necessarily want every question to appear on a different page. So you just have to be strategic with how you do those questions. Page breaks. I've got a page break here. Then I've got my question about what kind of person are you? Then there's another page break. And another reason to use page breaks is because sometimes you want some questions to appear or not appear. And so you can tell Qualtrics only display this question if they selected whatever on this other question. All right. Or skip to this. And so it's good to have those page breaks in there. Like this one, use what Qualtrics calls skip logic, which you see in purple right up here at the top. So skip to it. Oh, it's I'm remembering all the things I want to tell you. Here you see Q2 multiple choice, and then it says pets. And then you see this next one says Q16, and that's it. Name your questions, name your questions, name your questions. Why? Because once I export this data and I'm importing it into, let's say SPSS, when it has my variable name, it's going to be Q16. And then I'm going to have to go back and say, oh, what was Q16? And I have to go back and look like, what was the question? And how do I want to name this variable? But again, begin with the end in mind. If you go ahead and name them, you will save yourself so much headache of having to rename all of these things later in a different platform or wherever you analyze the data. So this one has a name. This is a question about pets. This one does not have a name, and I kick myself every time I export the data and see there's no name here. But these two I have on screen so I can show you this, the difference between the skip to, the skip logic, and the display logic. And this is what I was saying you get to at the bottom of that panel on the left once you choose your question type and all that. And so you see I've got this pets question highlighted. Which of the following have you ever had as a pet? Please select all that apply. All right, and then what am I saying? Skip to colors if none of these is selected. So I'm asking people what they had as a pet. But if you've never had a pet, you shouldn't go to the next question as what's your pet's name? You never had a pet. So how could you answer that question? So if somebody tells me that they never had any of these pets, I don't want them to see the next question. I want them to skip right to the next question after that, which is the question on colors. What is your favorite color? Okay, so that's why you would use the skip logic for a contingency question. For example, if you're asking about behaviors, if you're asking, okay, how often do you consume alcohol? If somebody tells you never, why would you ask them, well, on which days of the week do you consume alcohol? They just told you never. All right. And then the other one kind of goes with that, the display logic. If somebody tells me that they've never had a pet, I don't even want them to see this question about what was your first pet's name. All right, because there's no point in them even looking at it. I don't even want them to be tempted to write anything in that box. It does not apply to them. And so I've got this display logic. And while I'm here, I'll also point out that anytime you click on like the text of your question, you can edit the question, of course, but you always get this rich content editor. So maybe in this question, when I say, which of the following have you ever had as a pet? And then let's say I've got dog here. Maybe I would want to go back and also, excuse me, go to the rich content editor and then add in a picture of a dog here. All right. I wouldn't do that personally just because of screen real estate. Maybe a dog emoji that's going to be like in the line, but I feel like unless the question, unless I'm going to replace all the words with pictures of animals and say, which of the following have you ever had? Which again, I wouldn't do that either because that could be confusing. I could go get a picture of a Dalmatian and the person had a golden retriever and I'm saying, which of the following have you ever had as a pet? And they look at it and say, oh, well, I've never had a Dalmatian, so they're not going to check that, even though they had a golden retriever. So I'll just keep it simple and say dog. All right, simple. All right, so that's the skip logic and display logic. And again, you get those options for every single question you create, but you just have to kind of scroll down to the bottom to see it. Okay. Oh, and before I move on, oops, let's see this question. The other thing that I want to highlight, which I think I already showed you, this is also a multiple choice question, but this is the multiple answer. The one before, multiple choice, single answer. So you can see both of those. And then this one is the single line text type. So I had to choose question type, text entry. Okay, so I moved past multiple choice to text entry. Oops. Oh, and actually, one of the great things about Qualtrics, it gives you a little description of all the different question types. I'll show you more in just a second. So I've got text entry, but maybe I'm asking them for a paragraph. I can say I want multiple lines. You see, it gives them more room here. I can say I want it to be a whole essay box, which makes it a little bit bigger. Or if I'm looking for something like a password, it makes it shorter. So you can, especially if you're doing like a registration form, you want to choose the type of um, text box that uh, was appropriate to the length of the response that you're requiring. I don't know what the actual character limit is, but you can actually make other requirements like if you're looking for my question about what year were you born, and I was actually gonna let people type in numbers. I can add validation to this to say if people did not type in a number, then it's not valid. All right. The same thing with text. If I'm looking for text and they put in numbers, then I gotta say okay, no, not valid. So I do have a few ways that I can do that. As far as skip logic versus display logic, the skip logic is more for like a contingency question. If one question is dependent on or contingent upon how they answered a previous question, that's when you would want to use the skip logic. The display logic also because in order for display logic to work, well, let me go back. Uh, yeah, you can't have all your questions showing up on the page because then they're all going to be displayed. So you also have to think about where they appear. And so again, it's just like think about the logic of it where if somebody told you something isn't relevant, I can actually use skip and display logic together. So I'm telling it like this one. Um, if you've never had a pet, then skip this next question and go right to this question. So I got to tell it skip to, and then once I get to this question, it tells me this is the skip destination. And so I'm skipping from one to the other, but also don't even show them this question. So that's where the display logic comes in. So you can use them both together, or you can use them, separately. I could also choose, let's say, if somebody has never had a pet, um, in my skip logic, I could say skip to, and I can tell them, hey, if you've never had a pet, I don't even want to talk to you. You're not an animal person. In my survey right now, I can tell it go to the end of the survey. All right. I don't even want to see anything else from them. I'm not going to do that here. But you saw one of the other options was um, end question block. So that could be another workaround where if I've got a whole set of questions about pets, I've got a whole set of questions about family, I've got another set of questions about food. If I organize them into blocks, like I think I have a no, these aren't in blocks. They are in a block. So these questions are all in the block together, but it's not a logical block. It's the pets and the colors all together in one block. I could also say if they never had a pet and I don't need to know the pet's name and I don't need to know what breed or whatever it was, just go ahead and jump to the next question block, skip to the next question block. So it just kind of depends on what you need for your research purpose. Like and what it makes sense to display at the time. If the questions are related and depend or they're contingent upon how one question is answered, and then you might need to skip that whole subset or the probing questions depending on how they answer that first question. And then if you do that, you can just skip right to the next section, the next block, uh, the next most appropriate question. But you could also tell it don't even show these other questions if that's the case. Okay, I think I already showed you a drop-down list, so I'll just go from there. Um, Now this is something pretty cool. So this is a text entry, single line, like the one above. But what this block is doing, if you remember, there was a question. Well, you saw the question. Name a person you trust to give you advice, and then the very next question, what's the best piece of advice this person has given you? So if you put in this block, name a person you trust to give you advice, Nana. Well, in the next one, what's the best piece of advice Nana gave you? How did I do that? That is called pipe text. So of course, it could be something that somebody fills in. You could ask them, for their own name, and then later say, "Hey, Mila, you said that you like dogs. Have you ever tried this?" Um, so it could be something like that, or if you want to pull in the response from another question, like that question about what's your favorite color, I could say, how often I could create another question. How often, if your favorite color was red, you told me that. How often do you wear red shoes? And then maybe somebody else said their favorite question was green, but however they answered, I'm pulling in that answer. How often do you wear green shoes? But here I'm giving the example with name because, it's probably something, a feature that you want to use probably with more text. Or if you're asking people about their major, what is your major? And maybe you want to pull that into another question. How did you choose sociology as your major? Or why did you choose sociology as your major? All right, so how did I do that? It's called piped text. And how do I do the piped text? So first you have the question where you want the text to come from. But then here, this is the question. If you see all of these funny stuff in the middle of my question, what is the best piece of advice dollar sign, bracket, all this other stuff has ever given you. That I didn't write that. I didn't have to write that. I didn't have to know how to write that. That's the pipe text. So if you go to the question, I'm going to do this question because it doesn't have it on it. If I go to the question and I highlight the text, just like I get the rich content editor, I also get this pipe text um, tab at the top. And so actually what I want to do is instead of highlighting it everywhere, I just want to maybe I want my pipe text to go, let's just put it at the end so it'll be easy to delete. Then I go back to pipe text and I say, where do I want this text to come from? If you've ever played Super Mario and you know that Super Mario or Luigi could go down the pipe and come out somewhere else. That's what pipe text is. So, info goes in one place, it comes out somewhere else. And so it's asking me, where do I want that info to come from? Well, it's coming from one of my survey questions. Well, which question? For this one, I'm just gonna pick this first question. And then which response, because this is not open-ended, or maybe I should do the pet's name. Whatever they wrote for, what is your pet's name? Okay. And then to see, once I select where the info is coming from, it automatically writes the code that it needs to evaluate that. If I instead wanted to do that example with the different colors, I'm gonna say, how often do you wear blank color shoes? Well, I can just go to my drop down list of colors and tell it, I want all of my display choices to come up in there. Okay. And then I don't have to do anything else. Um, it's it. But because I don't want this in here, I'm deleting it from this question. All right. And so on this question where I actually used it, this is what I told it to do. Only show me this question. So the display logic here is saying only show this question the best piece of advice blank has ever given you if they actually put a name in here. Otherwise, I don't want them to see the $ bracket, all this other stuff. All right, so if they skip this question, if they didn't put any name in, then they should even see this next question. So that's why I have the display logic here. And then here, what's the best piece of advice blank has ever given you? I didn't have to do anything but tell it where the text was coming from. All right. I'm gonna speed up in the interest of time and just show you. So again, once you select a question, you get to tell it what type of question you want in there. This is the form field, and you see it's much shorter text fields for that. This is the one with the rank order. Again, only use it if you think it is going to add value to the data you're collecting, because it is very difficult for people to drag and drop things on the mobile device. All right. So that can be a challenge with the rank order question, because that's what they're supposed to do. Put these in order. Well, you saw it. You saw the question. Now, the matrix question, this is great if you have several items that are using the same scaling options, but just know that it can be very difficult to see, to like scroll horizontally on a mobile phone, sometimes even on a tablet. So it can be difficult to see all of the response options with this one sometimes. When you test your survey, be sure to look at it across multiple devices. In fact, you've got a preview button here that's going to show me how it would look on a web page as well as on a mobile phone. So you see here, and I can preview how my questions would look. And you see like how they would look on the screen versus a tiny screen. All right, the slider question, again, it was an example. I found that I've heard that this is also difficult for people to use. And that one about the star rating, oh wait, I think I passed it. Maybe I didn't. One of them, the star rating, I've heard is one of the phone operating systems that they don't show up on. And even this can be difficult for people to use like the slider function to like drag it across the screen, especially if you think about people with different abilities, don't have the same dexterity in their digits. So that can be difficult for people. And then just putting so much, I love the side by side on a computer screen, but on a small screen, very, very difficult for people to use. While I'm here, I will just go ahead and show you that we are here in the survey, like the builder options, but we've got some more options here. So we're here building the builder. We've got survey flow. And so when you organize your questions into blocks, maybe I decide I want the questions about your major and academics to come before all those questions about pets and colors. I can drag these things around and move them. And then this one, look and feel. This is where you get to the colors and the branding and stuff like that. We've already got stuff built in for us, but maybe I don't want the name at the top, the university name. Maybe I just want to add my own logo, but use the colors, or maybe I want something specific to social work or whatever, or maybe I want nothing at all. You got those options there. And then the survey options, um, what displays at the top? So the name, a description of your survey, and then other options that you might want to use. That's just general stuff. But in the responses, this is where you can tell it that, okay, yeah, if somebody starts taking my survey, but they don't finish, I want them to be able to come back and finish it later. I want them to be able to use the back button, or I don't want them to be able to use the back button. If they don't complete a survey question, what do I want to happen? Um, and then you got a few more options here, more advanced options. I'm just remembering something else I want to show you. Question types, I showed you, or I told you that you can, let me go to the end. You can hover over this this question type and it'll tell you, it'll give you a description over here, but I want to show you a few things. So if you choose meta info, you can get info about your respondents, like what kind of operating system or browsing they're using, but they don't see that. So if I choose that, it says this question will record the recipient's browser info, but it will not be displayed to the user. Maybe I want that meta info. And then the other one that you might want is timing. So it adds a timer to track and manage how much time they spend on the specific page. But again, they're not seeing that. This is only like meta information for you. And so I just wanted you to know that you had those two options. Let me delete those because they weren't there before. And then distributions, when after you previewed your survey, you got the look, feel, and flow that you want. Your let me go back. Hold on, builder. You have to hit the publish button. So you have to hit the publish button once you get your survey ready and previewed and you've taken it on multiple devices. And then, not workflow, why did I click on that? The distributions is where you can get the link or the QR code or figure out if you want to upload a list for Qualtrics to mail to people. And then see, the anonymous link and stuff like that. You just click and you tell it what you want. All right. And then data and analysis, preliminary analysis, and then the last thing I'll show you the results. Well, not the results, but let's say I could tell it which question I want to analyze here on the screen. I got a few basic things it can do, but I really want to export it somewhere else. So you got this export import, you tell it to export the data and tell it where you want it to export the data, SPSS, Excel, or other CSV files, and then download and import it where you want. All right. I know I just talked about so many things, but I'm going to end here. I want you to know that you have um, lots of different options for help, including built-in. You can also reach out to me. I'm trying to get my email address on screen. Okay, so many slides. There we go. And you can reach out to me if you do need additional assistance. You can also reach out to Qualtrics Help because the Qualtrics Help is really good. They've already got so many um, documentation and things that you can use. And then finally, this QR code is a real survey, not a sample one, a real survey about your experience here today. We would love if you could go ahead and evaluate this workshop. Let us know what you want more of, what you need less of. I'll also put the link in the chat for you. And I thank you for being here and being attentive today. And if you have other research needs, social research needs, just let me know. Otherwise, thank you for attending. Please scan the QR code to take the survey or click on the link in the chat to take the survey. And I will hang on for another minute in case you have questions. Thanks, y'all.